and welcome to the Getty Center. My name is Deborah Marrow, and I'm the director of the Getty Foundation, which is one of 4 programs that comprise the J. Paul Getty Trust. The others are the Getty Conservation Institute, the Getty Research Institute, and the J. Paul Getty Museum. So on behalf of Trust President and CEO Jim Cuno and the Getty Board of Trustees and the entire Getty staff, it's my pleasure to welcome the LA Business Council Sustainability Conference back to the Getty for the 12th time. And I don't know if any of you were there, but I've addressed you before. Those of you who've attended these summits in the past have heard about the Getty's commitment to our part to operate sustainably. We have 4 facilities, 2 of which you probably know well. The Getty Villa in Malibu, Pacific Palisades actually, and the Getty Center. But there are also 2 that are probably less well known to you, a 40-unit apartment building in Brentwood for our scholars, and a 106,000 square foot library annex in northern Los Angeles. There are projects underway this year, both at the Getty Center and Villa, that are designed to reduce landfill waste, improve energy efficiency, and conserve resources. To cite just a couple of examples, we are using a consultant to advise the Getty on ways to harvest rainwater in order to find more efficient methods of on-site water storage. We are ensuring that building systems, that HVAC and boilers are performing as designed. And in an effort to save water, electricity, and natural gas, along with reducing emissions, we are replacing our existing building management systems at the Getty Center in order to better control and monitor the site's mechanical and electrical equipment. So the Getty Foundation, the part that I direct, is the grant-making arm of the Getty. And the Foundation's grant programs are tied closely to the Getty's overall mission: to make art history more interdisciplinary and international, to create models for the practice of conservation internationally, to increase access to museum and archival collections, most recently in digital form, and to nurture a new generation of leaders in the visual arts. To date, the Foundation has awarded over 7,500 grants in more than 180 countries and on all 7 continents, yes, even Antarctica. And that number continues to grow. You can ask me about Antarctica in the break. Some of our signature grant initiatives include Pacific Standard Time, our ongoing exploration of the art of Southern California, the most recent iteration of which explored connections between Los Angeles, Latino, and Latin American art. The Multicultural Undergraduate Intern Program, which provides full-time paid internship opportunities for college undergraduates from cultural backgrounds that have traditionally been underrepresented in museums and the visual arts. And Keeping It Modern, an international grant initiative that supports conservation efforts for some of the most important buildings of the 20th century. As you can imagine, many of our initiatives must address issues of sustainability in order to be successful. For example, an important component of our Keeping It Modern grants is the funding of conservation management plans. These plans compile all the environmental, structural, and historical information about a building and often offer long-term recommendations for its continued care. Creating a conservation management plan requires a careful examination of the environmental needs of a building while practically addressing the budget and manpower needed to meet these needs. Keeping It Modern was designed to complement the Getty Conservation Institute's Conserving Modern Architecture initiative, and 2 of the 45 projects we have supported so far were in Southern California and were in collaboration with the Getty Conservation Institute. The first was one of our inaugural Keeping It Modern grants, awarded to the Eames House in Pacific Palisades, designed by Charles and Ray Eames as their home and studio. A conservation management plan is currently being developed to address the unique glass-enclosed house as well as the art and furniture inside it. Another early grant was for conservation work and a conservation management plan for the Salk Institute for Biological Studies outside San Diego. Again, working with the Conservation Institute, the foundation helped to understand and protect this Louis Kahn designed building, which is situated in a beautiful and environmentally challenging marine environment overlooking the hills, the cliffs of La Jolla. So you can see the foundation and the Getty as a whole must incorporate environmental concerns and solutions into much of what we do. I want to thank you again for being here at the Getty today, and I hope you have a productive and illuminating experience at the summit. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Evan Halper. I'm a national reporter at the Los Angeles Times. I'm going to be your MC this morning. And first, please join me in thanking Deborah and the Getty Center for graciously hosting again the Sustainability Summit at this iconic venue. The Los Angeles Business Council convenes this annual Sustainability Summit, now in its 12th year, to develop policies that advance sustainability and economic development in our region. The federal government has put the brakes on collaborating nationally and globally to combat climate change. The states and regions are stepping up to fill the void, particularly out here in the West. The West Coast is doing the work the Trump administration won't, leading the country toward a clean energy future. This week, the LABC and UCLA's Luskin Center for Innovation unveiled data revealing the West Coast GDP growth rate has outpaced that of the nation, expanding by 32.1%, even while the region pursued some of the most aggressive environmental regulations in the country, or actually in the world. These findings show how misleading the talking points out of the White House and the EPA headquarters are. Business can cut emissions and clean the air and see a healthy profit in the process. Today's summit is designed to build on the region's work in that regard. We'll look at new technology and public-private partnerships that promise to bring within reach the impressive goals the West has laid out to protect the environment and fight global warming. Joining us today for this discussion are state and local officials, heads of utilities, academics, private and philanthropic sector leaders. We'll have the state keynote from Kevin De Leon, who was Senate President Pro Tem. He will discuss his efforts to further increase our renewable energy targets and fund infrastructure projects for parks and water. But first, we'll introduce what we're calling spotlight sessions. Rapid-fire presentations from innovators looking at achieving zero waste and innovative transportation solutions. After the spotlight sessions and Kevin De Leon's speech, let me just go through the spotlight sessions. The first panel will look more deeply in the spotlight sessions at the role of technology in helping address our power needs and the future of electrified transportation. We'll take a short break after that panel, and then we'll be joined by the governors of Oregon and Washington and Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti. They'll lead a discussion on West Coast regional climate leadership and the important role regional partnerships like the Pacific Coast Collaborative, the U.S. Climate Alliance, and climate mayors play in scaling our sustainability goals. You can find a description of the coalitions in your program guide. After our sustainability keynote from Emil Haddad, CEO and chairman of 5 Point, we'll break for lunch. We'll return to hear panels discussing pathways to achieving California's climate change and clean energy goals, a water keynote from the new director of the California Department of Water Resources, Carla Nemeth, and a panel featuring a state legislative update from Assemblymember Laura Friedman and how the Metropolitan Water District is financing the twin tunnels known as California Water Fix. You can find bios of today's speakers in your program guide. Please note, today's summit will be live streaming on LABC's website, labusinesscouncil.org. We will also be filming portions of the program on air at LA City View, Channel 35. Don't forget to tweet, post, and share with our social media, hashtag LA Business Summit 18. Today will be a widely viewed event with over 500 attendees at the Getty throughout the day and over 700 joining us via live stream. I'd now like to welcome our next speaker, Nadine Watt. Nadine is chair of the Los Angeles Business Council and president of Watt Companies, where she oversees all commercial investment activities for the company's 8 million square foot portfolio of multifamily, industrial, office, and retail properties. Please join me in welcoming Nadine Watt to the stage.
Thank you, Evan. Let's give another round of applause for Evan Helper. Thank you. And a major thank you to all of our business leaders, public officials, and distinguished guests joining us here today. On behalf of the Los Angeles Business Council and the Los Angeles Business Council Institute, thank you for joining us at our 12th Annual Sustainability Summit. Every year, we look forward to this outstanding and important event, and we thank the Getty for allowing us to use this fantastic space. We are incredibly grateful for your continued partnership. Let's put our hands together for our gracious host again. Thank you. Before we proceed, I would like to acknowledge some of the people and organizations that have worked hard to put this event together. I would like to thank our summit co-chairs, Bank of America, California Community Foundation, 5 Point, Hayworth, JP Morgan Chase, Ralph's Food for Less, LADWP, the Rosalind and Arthur Gilbert Foundation, and Walmart. And I would like to thank our event hosts, GAF, Pattern Energy, Parsons, Sanexen, Smart Energy Water, Southern California Edison, Trammell Crow Company, as well as all of our committee-level sponsors who you can find listed in your program guide. Without your continued support, today's event would not be possible. I would also like to acknowledge our over 70 cooperating organizations for being with us today and for your help promoting this summit. You will see a list of those organizations in your program as well. We are so thrilled to have all of you here with us today. I'd like to give a quick shout out to our honorees from our VIP reception last night, emceed by our own Brad Cox, LABC Institute Chairman. We are proud to present the LABC Legacy Award to Mary Nichols for her role in creating, implementing, and extending California's landmark cap-and-trade program. LA City Council member Paul Krikorian, who received the Leadership Award for authoring a motion directing LADWP to study a pathway for Los Angeles to achieve 100% renewable energy. Our Sustainable Impact Award went to the UCLA Luskin Center for Innovation for their commitment to producing cutting-edge research in clean energy. And finally, the Sustainable Business Award went to Gensler for committing to sustainability through architecture and design. It was a wonderful event last night, and we were excited so many of you were able to join us. This past year, we have seen how Los Angeles and California have set their own path independent of the federal government. We have worked to maintain the mission of a clean and inclusive economy in the face of deteriorating policy at the national level. In continuing toward these goals, we have held true to our identity as Californians. This identity has led to ambitious climate goals, the world's 6th largest economy, and countless innovations. In Los Angeles, we were proud to hear our mayor announce that LA leads the nation with the most installed solar power in the nation, powering the equivalent of over 82,000 homes. Thank you, Mayor Garcetti and the City Council for this outstanding accomplishment. This investment in solar has employed thousands of local union veterans and youth workers and benefited Angelenos and communities across Los Angeles. We look forward to the city doubling down on these efforts. The LABC has been a proud champion and supporter of growing our local solar resources, including the feed-in tariff solar rooftop program that has helped create local jobs, leverage investment, and spur economic development in communities that have been historically divested and polluted. States and cities across the nation have taken note and joined us in pursuing sound environmental policy while other state governments and federal governments falter. Today we see examples of how our region is moving forward, and we'll hear from innovators, policy leaders, and businesses that are making it possible. Without further ado, thank you for joining us at this incredible summit, and we hope you enjoy yourselves.
Okay, let's kick off the spotlight sessions. These will be two 10-minute presentations meant to highlight innovation and new models of addressing our sustainability needs. Our first spotlight session speaker, Erica Waldman, is discussing how academic institutions can lead on sustainability. Dr. Waldman serves as director of the California State University Northridge Sustainability Institute and CSUN professor of psychology. She teaches and conducts research at CSUN on both psychology and sustainability. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Erica Waldman.
In the US, there are more than 130,000 elementary and secondary schools and over 7,000 post-secondary institutions. The education sector serves more than 75 million students, people who spend hours every day, every week, learning. And at each step along the way, we have an opportunity to discuss issues around sustainability, ecological resilience, and social well-being. I have the privilege of working at such an institution, California State University Northridge, which we call CSUN. We've made sustainability a key priority, integrating it into every aspect of the university, from operations and infrastructure to education and research. We've made a lot of progress over the years, so what I'm sharing with you today is sort of our roadmap, if you will. From the 1980s to the mid-2000s, most of our efforts were dominated by operations. Folks working to enhance energy efficiency, reduce consumption, and begin our transition to renewables through, for example, PV installation projects like the one shown here that shades our cars. Also in the early 90s, AS began a recycling collection program that generates revenue and reduces our waste stream. But in the last 10 years, our efforts have really skyrocketed. In 2008, a faculty-led grassroots effort established a core green team on campus. We primarily worked on campus greening projects, like, for example, banning styrofoam from our campus and starting a sustainable office program. It was sort of the Wild West back then. We mostly knew how to ask for forgiveness. More civil, for sure, than the Monkey Wrench gang, but along the same lines. There are obvious limitations to that approach. And so a year later, we established an Institute for Sustainability, which I'll talk about in a moment. Our small and very passionate group made tons of progress on our campus, but in my opinion, what pushed us to become leaders in sustainability, CSUN is among the top 10 for master's degree level institutions in ASHE's North American Sustainable Campus Index. What got us here was our president's willingness to sign the American College and University President's Climate Commitment in 2013. This required us to develop a climate action plan to achieve carbon neutrality and also to create a resiliency plan. That same year, she also asked us to create a sustainability plan, which I'll also talk about. In 2014, facilities hired a sustainability coordinator and now director, and that same year, the CSU system adopted a system-wide sustainability policy. Thankfully, CSUN already had a running start. But for many institutions, overcoming barriers to change are really difficult, if not impossible, without this level of institutional top-down support. So I just want to say thanks to all of the leaders who believe in science. Thanks. The Institute for Sustainability, for which I'm interim director, works with all departments on campus and makes recommendations. We're supported by the provost, and our mission is to promote and develop education, research, and programming related to sustainability. Some of the work that we do includes developing strategies so that we can achieve our campus commitments. We work with faculty and students to conduct research. We also collect and analyze our own data. I write grants. We host workshops, events, and speakers. We do a lot. As I mentioned, our Campus Climate Action Plan is guiding us to carbon neutrality. And in fact, in 2015, we were already reduced our GHG emissions to 1990 levels, ahead of AB 32 state goals. But we all know that sustainability requires more than counting carbon. So our 10-year sustainability plan was intended to establish a culture of sustainability throughout our entire campus. Our little group divided to conquer, forming 10 working groups, which I'll discuss pretty briefly today. Each of the groups meets just twice a semester. It's fairly low commitment. We plan our goals for the year, and then we meet again at the end to discuss our progress. Obviously, I don't have time to share everything that we do, but as you can imagine, it's quite a lot. So I'll just start with a few highlights. The administration working group weaves sustainability into our already established processes. They're improving the infrastructure, data collection, and record keeping necessary for all of our campus reporting requirements, such as ASHE's STARS. CSUN has gold status. The education working group obviously is focused on education, educating, promoting curriculum, designing standardized signage, and our website. The dining working group is assessing ways to increase sustainable food options on our campus and to reduce dining-related waste, for example, by introducing all compostable diningware, banning plastic bags, and helping with the BYOB, that's for bottle, campaign to get rid of single-use plastic water bottles. We also help out our student-led chapter of the Food Recovery Network. You've probably all heard of Farm to Table. Well, they're sort of a trash to table group, recovering food that would be tossed out at the end of the business days and getting it to people who need it. The organics group supports our campus composting program, which diverts 100% of all of our pre-consumer food waste on campus. That's more than 50,000 pounds of kitchen scraps from the landfill each year. We turn that into 12,000 pounds of soil that goes into our campus food gardens. They're also working on expanding post-consumer composting and a lot of other projects. Transportation has a hard job. They're focused on reducing commuting miles in single occupancy vehicle. We're a commuter school based in a car culture, so it's a difficult job. But our research suggests that their strategies are really paying off. They've introduced a car share program, carpool, and just recently a bike share program, which our students really love. Water group is working on native plant projects, turf removal, and hydrogel injections for the fields that require grass. Energy and building is implementing metering at the building level so we can better understand how to manage our energy-related emissions. Environmental quality is working to get harmful chemicals off campus, eco-friendly lawn products, cleaning products. Purchasing and consumption is working to reduce our waste generated by the campus. They're buying things that are, ensuring that we're buying things that aren't designed for the dump, and then waste and materials management is working to reduce our waste. In fact, they turned one of our largest dining facilities recently into a zero waste facility. Thank you. Our whole campus is actually going zero waste very soon. We're working out the logistics for our plan. As you can see, it takes a village, from line cooks to VPs. We're all in it together. And education is our primary objective. So these working groups are shifting our campus mindset. We're not just educating students in the classroom. We're educating everyone on campus, even visitors, about the importance of environmental stewardship. Signs, marketing, awards, newspaper articles, events. These are all ways that we educate outside of the classroom. We also literally take people outside. Sustainability, this is our campus food garden, one of our campus food gardens where we teach students about regenerative urban farming. And the food that we grow is donated to volunteers and also to our CSUN food pantry, which was formed to address food insecurity on our campus. We host a ton of events in the fall, Sustainability Day and Water Day in the spring, allowing us to reach thousands of students on our campus. We also promote the work of NGOs that are local, like Tree People, LA Kitchen, Five Gyres, and Food Forward. In fact, we collaborate with Food Forward to harvest from our historic orange grove. And they just gave us an award this year for being their largest food donor. We've given them more than 150,000 pounds of oranges from our garden to feed our city. As a cognitive scientist, I'm really curious about whether these changes have ripple-out effects. For example, now that our custodians are used to using green cleaning products, are they more likely to buy them at home for their families? Are the garden volunteers growing food or herbs at their homes? Are they going to neighborhood council meetings or food policy council meetings? I know many of them are here today. But regardless, I'm sure that our little city of 40,000 people at CSUN is having a huge impact. We're dedicated to taking better care of the planet and of each other. And as someone who calls the City of Angels my home, I'm really proud of that. I hope that you are too. I just want to give a little word of thanks to our student interns and to encourage you to come and visit us. You can find me here at our brand new LEED Platinum Sustainability Center. I'd be happy to show you around. And please keep up with us on our newsletter and social media. Thank you so much.
Now here to introduce today's state keynote, please welcome Cisco DeVries.
Good morning. Thank you to the incomparable Mary Leslie, the entire Los Angeles Business Council for hosting this summit and leading on so many of these important issues. This organization, the leaders in this room, have made Los Angeles an international leader, and it is a great honor for me to be here this morning. It is my privilege to introduce one of California's great leaders on building a clean energy economy that is vibrant, sustainable, and inclusive. Throughout his career, Senator Kevin De Leon has championed landmark energy policies, including SB 350, which established a 50% renewable energy goal by 2030, and SB 5, which will place a $4 billion bond measure on the June 2018 ballot to fund critical infrastructure for water and for parks. But it's not just goals and not just money. It's also a real action to ensure that Californians, all Californians, can benefit from our transition to clean energy and a clean economy. Another critical initiative he led was SB 535, which took funding from the state's greenhouse gas cap and trade program, targeted those investments then into California's most disadvantaged communities. We were just talking backstage about yesterday being at a home, I believe Figueroa's home in East Los Angeles, where they had gone solar, energy efficiency, and an EV, and making sure here's a neighborhood that had not had a lot of access to those types of technologies or improvements before, and what an amazing difference it was making for them, but also for their neighbors who are now moving in that direction. This effort, this last effort, is of particular importance to me as a former aide to the President Clinton's Secretary of Energy, as the Chief of Staff to a mayor, and now as the last 10 years as the founder and chief executive of Renew Financial. I'm very much focused on how we democratize access to clean energy and energy efficiency. Everybody should live in a home that is efficient, comfortable, and secure. I am pleased that Renew Financial's mission is really about expanding this access. I'm proud of the 90,000 homes and businesses that we have helped to turn to clean energy and energy efficiency. And I'm even more proud of the fight that we have made to ensure that this access comes with safety and consumer protections. And I'd like to give an example of this that really gets to the heart of both my introduction and to the importance of this issue. Property Assessed Clean Energy, or PACE, is created by local governments, run by local governments, and provides financing for energy efficiency, solar PV, water efficiency, heating and cooling, other types of really critical improvements to homes that make them less expensive to operate, cleaner, and healthier. Those types of improvements should not just be for the wealthy, and under Kevin De Leon's leadership, thanks in part to him, last year they were able to pass two pieces of important legislation for PACE, which ensured the continued access of this important financing run by the local government partners, but also very strong consumer protections, underwriting, contractor rules, and others to make sure that people not just have access, but that access is safe, their outcomes are great, and we all participate in the benefits of a clean economy. So, it is important now for me to say what a great honor it is to have Kevin De Leon here to recognize the leadership he has given to all of us and to me in helping us meet our environmental goals and do so in a broad-based and community-engaged way. And I'm excited to introduce a man who shares this vision of a clean energy economy and a clean energy economy that works for everybody in California. So, California Senator, U.S. Senate candidate, Kevin De Leon.
Thank you so very much. Good morning. How are we feeling today? I want to say this. It is indeed an honor and pleasure to be here with each and every one of you, and I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to share a few words with all of you. I know that this past year has been, in fact, a very difficult year for those of us who acknowledge the urgency of climate change and actually want to see action. Not action tomorrow, but action today. And I know it's easy to see the news and feel somewhat angry, maybe somewhat despondent, a sense of hopelessness about the future. But clearly, there are many challenges ahead, whether it's the trade disputes, the perhaps a threat of real tariffs with China, as well as tax credits, or in fact, Trump tweets every day. But there's also boundless opportunity. And despite the vacuum of leadership in Washington, I want you to know that California's commitment to a clean energy future is stronger than ever. We're not going to go back. We're not going to waver. I want that to be a very clear, ambiguous message to each and every one of you. Our commitment is stronger than ever, with or without Washington. Now, I've never been prouder to call this state, our state, California, my home. Under both Democratic as well as Republican administrations, going back to Ronald Reagan's days as governor, California has consistently pushed for cleaner air, water, as well as energy, more energy-efficient buildings and vehicles, and stronger protections for our cherished natural landscapes as well as resources. Now, these efforts were driven by necessity, not ideology. I say this because Californians were literally sick of drinking dirty water and breathing dirty air, and the consequences were holding back our economy. By following the science and taking common sense steps to protect consumers, wildlife, our air, as well as our water, we've turned some of our biggest environmental challenges into incredible economic opportunities. We passed the toughest emissions standards in America, the strongest energy efficiency laws, and the most clean energy efficient goals. And we have protected our coasts and stopped offshore oil drilling. And just last year, as Cisco just mentioned a few moments ago, we passed Senate Bill 5 to put a measure on the upcoming June ballot. You'll see it on June 5th as Proposition 68. That is my measure that I wrote. That is to provide $4 billion. That is to provide $4 billion for our floodgates, flood control, for our waterways, as well as for parks and open space for communities have little parks in open space. This will give, again, voters a chance to fund flood protection, water supply reliability, as well as new parks and open space. This is the first bond measure in state history to focus on social equity. We have close to $1.2 billion in this bond to create parks and open space in those communities who frankly need it the most. That is Prop 68. It's on the ballot June the 5th. Please, please be supportive of this measure. And by the way, there's another person on that ballot too, June the 5th too. And so please give me your best consideration as well too. That was shameless. I'm sorry. Now, as a result of the collective effort of both Democrats and Republicans over the last few decades, California's air is cleaner, our water is healthier, and our kids are breathing easier and living much longer. And this is not just about the environment. It's also about the economy. Over our decades-long commitment to energy efficiency, which began with Jerry Brown in his first stint as governor of California back in the 1970s, has not only kept our state's electricity consumption flat, despite a growing population, 40 million today in California, it has also kept California's energy spending among the lowest in the nation. Over the decades, these efforts have helped save American households billions of dollars in avoided fuel and energy costs. In fact, despite all the doomsday rhetoric we've heard from the critics over the years, Californians spend less on energy than all but a handful of states. We spend about half of what an average Louisiana or North Dakota household pays on an annual basis. And those are two very rich fossil fuel states. Now, since we passed AB 32 back in 2006, the Global Warming Solutions Act, our per capita GDP has grown by nearly twice the national average. And we've easily outpaced the nation in job creation. In fact, coming off the worst economic recession since the Great Depression of 1929, we've harnessed the power of the wind and the sun to create over 500,000 clean energy jobs in California alone, putting California workers on a pathway to a higher quality of life. Now, I want to put this in context for all of you, because this is something to be very proud of, because it's not an alternative fact. It's not fake news. It's backed with real empirical evidence that you can measure and quantify. We have now 10 times more jobs in the clean energy space in California than there are coal mining jobs in all of America. Which is why the president's fossil fuel fetish just isn't environmentally out of touch. Quite frankly, it is economically out of whack. If the president really wants to put the people to work and make America the world's energy superpower, quite frankly, he should follow our lead. In California, we're not holding back the free market. In fact, we're doing quite the opposite. We're pushing it forward. We're disrupting the status quo, catalyzing investment, innovation, and competition, and charting a much more prosperous and sustainable economic path. Our commitment to strong environmental protections is a leading reason why California remains the nation's capital of innovation. We didn't grow into the 6th largest economy and the epicenter of innovation by embracing alternative facts or pseudo-scientific nonsense. Not in California. In this state, we make our public policy based on facts and science. We are informed by the scientists who we work very closely with, Nobel Prize winners, the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, Caltech, UCLA, Stanford, Cal, and many other great leading academic institutions and think tank groups. We listen to folks like you in the audience, scientists, academics, entrepreneurs, folks who are on the cutting edge, who are disruptors of the status quo. Your data, your wealth of knowledge informs me as a policymaker to move forward policies that improve the human condition for all individuals, regardless of who you are and where you come from. Like Cisco mentioned a few moments ago, I had the honor to be with the Figueroas yesterday in East Los Angeles. Imagine East LA, an energy-efficient home, rooftop distributed generation, a charging station, an electric vehicle. This is the model that we want to use and metastasize in all communities throughout California, because if we don't, we'll never reach our macro global target goals. It's not enough if a house in Pacific Palisades or right here in Brentwood or Palo Alto are the only ones who have access to the latest and greatest clean technologies. If in fact we want to move forward and meet our macro global target goals, we have to democratize our climate change benefits and make sure everyone has access, regardless of who you are, regardless of where you come from, regardless of who you love, regardless of what God you pray to, regardless of the hue of your skin, and yes, your legal status. This is the promise of California. And this is what makes California such a magical place in comparison to Washington, D.C. Now, yesterday, the American Lung Association unveiled its annual report on the nation's air quality. Unfortunately and sadly, 8 of the 10 most polluted cities in the United States are, in fact, here in California. In Los Angeles has taken, again, the dubious distinction of being number 1. 19 years straight, close to 2 decades, of having the highest ozone area in the country. 8 of the 10 cities in the country are here in California. More than 40% of Americans live in counties with unhealthful levels of either ozone or particulate matter pollution in 2014 and 16. This is a reminder that we have a lot of work to do before us. We still have to keep pushing the ball to make sure that every child has an opportunity to breathe clean air into her lungs. We cannot take this for granted, nor the progress that we have achieved to date, regardless of what Scott Pruitt does at the EPA and what he attempts to do to eviscerate our clean air, our clean water, our safe drinking water acts. We must move forward with intentionality and a sense of purpose. We're not going to allow one election, or I should say perhaps one electoral aberration, reverse generations of progress at the height of our historic diversity, our scientific advancement, our economic output, and our sense of global responsibility. That's not who we are in the great state of California. We push, we innovate, we catalyze, we activate. And that's why I'm using every last second of my time in the Senate to push California even further to 100% clean energy, Senate Bill 100. Now, as you know, I introduced Senate Bill 100 last year to put California on a pathway to 100% clean energy by the year 2045. I feel this is an incredible opportunity for California. Just think about the progress that we've made since we first passed our first RPS and the incredible verifiable economic benefits. We've gone from 0 to 50% in the last 20 years. When we started at 0 to 20%, all the doomsday predictors said we would destroy the economy. Then in fact, utility rates would go through the roof. Then in fact, gas prices would be astronomical. We've gone from 0 to 20, and then 20% to 33%. Now with my Senate Bill 350, which is statutory, it's codified, it is a law of the land. We have to get to 50% by the year 2030. We are on that pathway. Investor-owned utilities have already signaled that they will be at 50% by the year 2020. But it's not just investor-owned utilities. It's also MOUs like LADWP, municipally owned utilities, as well as disruptors like CCAs. Whoever is a seller of energy has to meet those goals by the year 2030, period. And we're well on our way. And that's what happens when you move policies with intentionality and a sense of purpose that catalyzes the market and sends the right market signals that attracts the necessary capital to create the technologies that are necessary to meet our ambitious target goals, to grow this economy, to put people to work, to allow children to breathe clean air into their lungs, to decrease our amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and guess what? Provide a tax cut to each and every one of you, to provide a tax cut to constituents throughout California. So when they open up that envelope, they're paying less money out of their pocket to cool their rooms, to heat their rooms, to light their rooms. This is a golden opportunity that we're demonstrating here in California. That's why we cannot let the naysayers hold us back. That's why we must continue to disrupt. Again, the last 20 years, we've gone from 0 to 50%. Statutorily, by law in California, and we are well on our way to meet those targeted goals. We have created hundreds of thousands of good, clean energy jobs in the process across every corner of the state. And like I said, we're well on our way to meeting 50%, 10 years ahead of schedule, of the target date of 2030. All the evidence suggests 100% clean energy is within reach. And the overwhelming majority of Californians support this goal. In fact, 76% of Californians, with strong majorities, with Democrats as well as Republicans, support this goal. And to their credit, many of California's biggest companies like Google and Apple already on their way to 100% clean energy. Even the largest brewer, that being Budweiser, InBev, have already committed to be 100% clean energy. They're lowering their footprint by the year 2025. As the 6th largest economy on the planet, California can show the nation and the world what's possible, and we can truly create a sustainable economy for our kids and future generations. Now, I want to make a few brief observations before I conclude. While it's certainly not helpful to have a very hostile Congress and executive branch in Washington, it won't be enough to halt the global momentum of clean energy. I still feel incredibly optimistic about the future for a few key reasons. The first, as we already discussed, the power of state and local leadership. You'll hear from a few of my friends, from Kate Brown, from north of us up in Oregon, and Jay Inslee in Washington, good friends that we have shared policies together with who are doing a great job in the Pacific Northwest. The second is the growing international momentum of even among the largest global polluters, such as China, as well as India. China sees the writing on the wall. They're investing massive amounts of capital to try to take the lead as the world's clean energy superpower. Unfortunately, we have a president in the White House right now who is serving on a silver platter the clean energy leadership mantle to the Chinese. And the Chinese are more than happy to take advantage of this opportunity. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, is the incredible incredible technological breakthroughs of recent years and their effects on the global markets. Over 60% of all new energy generation in the U.S. in 2016 was from both wind as well as solar, and the prices are falling dramatically. Clean energy is now cheaper in many parts of the nation than natural gas, even without subsidies. In fact, over the last 7 years, the nationwide price trend for wind is down by 2/3, 66%, and solar is down 85%, according to industry analysis at Lazard. Many solar projects across the country are being priced at $1 per watt. That's down over 75% since the year 2011. And a growing number, in fact, of even politically very conservative states, such as Iowa, Texas, and Oklahoma, now generate 20% of their energy, or I should say electricity, from wind energy. As clean energy costs continue to decline, demand will increase, employment will grow, and the political dynamic will shift. In the meantime, I want you to know that I'm committed to using every legal and political tool at my disposal to accelerate that process. That's why, in 2016, I hired the former Attorney General of the United States of America, Eric Holder, to help inform me of what our options are on the issues of clean energy, the environment, the air, and also on the issue of protecting our people, our immigrant communities, our dreamers, our DACA beneficiaries. It all comes together. It's a confluence. It's not clean energy here. It is not energy efficiency over there. It's not the environment over there and immigrants over here. It's all of us together. This is the promise of a great state like California. That's what makes California so magical, that someone, the youngest child of a single immigrant mother with a third-grade education, could have the honor to address each and every one of you here today at the Getty Museum. That's what makes California so magical. That's what makes us the greatest state and the greatest nation in the world. And by doing so, we will continue California's trailblazing tradition. It's vital, more than ever, that we as a state remain America's exceptional example, a beacon of hope and opportunity in an uncertain world. That California, as you know, was not part of this nation when its history began, but today we are now clearly the keeper of its future. With that, God bless each and every one of you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. I think anybody who's been paying attention knows that California is not waiting and not slowing down, regardless of what the Trump administration is doing. In fact, you might have noticed there's not even a regional administrator for the Environmental Protection Agency in California in the West because nobody wants the job. I think they keep asking people and they think it's a fool's errand to try to carry out Scott Pruitt's agenda out here, so the post is still vacant. We're going to move on to our next spotlight session, and I'm going to introduce Derek Shong. He's the co-founder and chief marketing officer of EHang, a manufacturer of commercial and civilian drones. The LABC first met Derek in 2014 while hosting a delegation from the city of Guangzhou as part of LA's tripartite agreement between Guangzhou, Auckland, and the city of Los Angeles. This valuable partnership, initiated by Mayor Garcetti, not only led to an exchange of best practices between the three cities, but also led to EHang to receive seed funding from a group of investors here in Los Angeles, ultimately helping launch one of the most exciting new transportation companies in the world. EHang produced the world's first autonomous aerial vehicle, the EHang 184, and ranks in the world's top 3 drone companies. For his work at EHang and throughout the entrepreneurial community, Derek was awarded as one of Forbes 30 Under 30 in Asian manufacturing and energy in 2016. Derek's presentation is titled, Creating a Three-Dimensional Transportation System with Drones. Please join me in welcoming Derek Shong.
Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm Derek. I'm the co-founder of EHang. So EHang is a company, so people ask what we do. So we are basically making the future generation or the next generation of drones or aircraft. So today, I think I'm supposed to talk about how can we build up a three-dimensional transportation system. But before I talk about that, I want to show you this picture. Can anyone guess what is this? You know, those shining little dots in the sky. Drones, right? So this is actually happened. You know, was happening last December during the Global Fortune Forum, where it was held in Guangzhou, one of the biggest city in China. So we had this performance for the Global Fortune Forum, and there was a total of 1,180 drones up there in the sky, controlled by one computer. Each drone is carrying a LED light and can fly into any form, any formation. So we also make this kind of technology into you know, commercial, a new kind of a business model. So now we have performed over 100 times for around China, and this year we're coming to, you know, we're coming to overseas and to perform, you know, to can form logos or any shape that you want. So this one is another performance we did this February in the city of Xi'an in China. So all these 500 drones form, you know, this time tunnel, and you can see this in 3D. So what you're seeing here is not just a performance by the drones. It is also the future, what you're seeing here, because the idea is very similar, is that how can we, you know, how can we build up this three-dimensional transportation system and controlled by one single command control center, and this is what you're seeing. Okay, so, you know, the question is, you know, especially in LA, I think, yeah. I've been here a couple of times before, yeah, you know, I told you, that's why I booked the hotel last night, like 1 kilometer away, you know, making sure I can stand here talking to you guys. So, and this is the land, you know, there's really not much space, and no matter we're talking about subway or highway, there's seriously not much space we can do. And this is the sky. So then a lot of people are going to ask, like, why, you know, since we're talking about the future transportation system, why, you know, the traditional aero vehicle, you know, couldn't fly into the daily lives of general public? Because we think this is, you know, this photo pretty much talks about the reason that it's way too complicated. And actually, US is one of the easiest countries to get a piloting license. But if you think about other countries outside the US, it's, you know, it's far less, you know, traffic in the air as well, because it's just way too complicated. And also for ordinary people like me, because I don't have any piloting license, it's impossible for me to think about, you know, piloting a plane or helicopter around the city. So this is the solution we built, and this is what we do. It's called the EHang 184. We have built this flying machine in the past 5 to 7 years. The reason it's called EHang 184 is because it's 1 passenger, 8 propellers, and 4 arms. If you take a look at its design, it's very uniquely designed that has a multi-rotor structure using electrical motors instead of traditional engines. And also, this kind of unique structure could provide extra redundancy for safety, which means even you lost 1 propeller or 1 propeller malfunctions, if you're still able to land to your, you know, the nearest landing possible point. And this is another one. Yeah, that's me inside. I know you're gonna ask, like, you know, have you ever tried this before? So that's me inside. And those are the 2 heaviest, you know, men in our company, like sitting together. I know this is probably not right to say this here, but that's, you know, that's my partner, you know, flying into here. So basically, this is a completely autonomous aero vehicle, which is, you know, flying car. I know back to the 70s or 60s as well, you know, before I was born, you know, here in US, there was an animation called the Jetsons. It's pretty much like that. So, yeah, so these are all the real testing. It's not, you know, it's not faked, you know, it's not Photoshop. This is all real, and we have been working on this for the past 5 years, and we have done over 1,000 flying tests, and those are 2 flying together, kind of a, you know, 3D thing. So we are, you know, we have done over 1,000 times the test and carrying over 40 different passengers. Do you like it? So this photo actually is taken here, Because 2 years ago, when we first launched it in Las Vegas during the CES 2016, Vogue magazine actually, came to us and say, hey, we thought what you're doing is really cool. So why not bring your flying machine to here. So this is, I think, somewhere on top of Beverly Hills. And I think I remember it was the March issue, 2016. The guy in the middle plays Jaime Lannister in Game of Thrones. Yeah, and the car over there is the car, it's called Friday Future. Some of you might heard of it. So basically, it's, Vogue magazine is trying to describe, a scene for future, like what it looks like for our future life and our daily life looks like, those kids, a happy family, with a car, with a flying machine, And we thought that's definitely not too far away. So how it works, so as you can see here, because we don't really have any, the space is really limited. So what we can do today is that, it's like it doesn't take, because this does not have a wing, and it can do vertically takeoff and landing. So it just and all they need is a small space, and definitely, around half size of the stage. It can allow this flying machine to take it off and land. And we can also use the rooftop to do it. And it fly in this shape of inverted letter U, letter U shape, and fly from A to B. So most of their trips, according to our survey, within the city, is that people travel around like 20 miles, like for the daily commute. So yeah, my assistant draw me this map. Say how can we 12 miles from Getty Center to downtown LA. And obviously this this China Google map. So. Yeah, because we need to get through the Great Firewall to do Google, to check Google, yeah. So the flying machine flies with a speed of 60 miles per hour. I don't know, but I think in LA the traffic is really bad as well as and it's pretty much the same everywhere I visited. In Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, China, every big city is like this, and we don't see any real solution. So it takes less than 12 minutes, to fly from Getty Center. And this covers actually, so the flight time for this machine is less than 30 minutes. But let's talk about a daily routine commute from your home to your office, and it solves like 80% of the problem for most of the people. Some basic parameters. This EHang 184 around 25 minutes, cruising duration. It only takes 1 hour to do the charge, and also it's only like can carry up to 100 kilograms. So I'm close to that, but that's why there's another machine later I can show you, a bigger one, right? But that was the prototype. That was the first one to basically to test on the flight control algorithm to make sure that we have the right flying algorithm to control such a big multi-rotor aircraft, a drone. So how can we ensure safety, right? So people are gonna ask, how you're able to actually test over 40 passengers. And actually just last week, I think 3 days ago, the Prince from Holland just, became our latest actual flying passenger, testing passenger. So we just shipped one, flying car to Holland, and the Prince, I forgot the name, but obviously he's our very first, passenger in Europe as well. And the vice mayor of the city of Guangzhou also was, he flew up like almost like a year ago. So how can we ensure these, important people's life, right, during this testing and early stage? First of all, we have this fail-safe system, which means that this kind of mechanical design sacrifices a lot for safety and with the trade-off of efficiency. Not as same as the helicopter that can travel, a much longer distance. This one, because we use 8 propellers. So the energy consumed is much higher, but because of that, these 8 propellers is operated independently by independent battery and independent motors, which means it's impossible for all the 8 propellers to malfunction at the same time. So anyone gets down, you got a rest of to back it up. That's what we call the redundancy, in the IT. And second thing, this is also a real, pretty much looks like NASA, but this is a real, we believe is the world's very first command control center, especially for flying cars, for drones. We built this command control center in Guangzhou so that this command control center can track real-time data, all the data, sensors, speed, GPS, every single thing from the drone and from the aircraft, so that as a passenger, you don't need to get a piloting license. You're just sitting there, play with your phone, listen to music, and the flight control, this flight command control center will know where you're heading to and make a plan for your destination, and also make sure the whole air traffic is being well managed. So we have done over 1,000 times, including climbing tests like 3 meters high in altitude, high maneuver tests, and during foggy weather, night tests, long range 8.8 kilometers with a speed of 130 kilometers per hour. And most importantly, we did this like typhoon, test Force 7 last year. Every year in Guangzhou, there's a typhoon, every year during that time, we brought all of our drone, out there and to test it out, to test it out. So what will we do next time? What will we do the next? As I say, EHang 184 definitely couldn't satisfy a lot of, like most of the people's need. So we came up with this two-seater one. Instead of have a one-seater, this is a two-seater. It's called, temporarily, it's called EHang 216 because it's 2-passenger, 16 propellers, and 8 arms. So we're gonna have definitely, so we believe that the critical problem, for the future, for this kind of flying machine, that it's not a regulation, because China, Dubai, we work with Dubai Road Transportation Authority, we work with China CAAC, and we're kind of like plan to test in the state of Nevada as well. So regulation will come someday, and we're not worried about our technology because we know what we're doing. So what we're more worried about people's mentality. That might be the biggest challenge in the future because people are not afraid of death, but people are afraid of a new way of dying. So that's why so that's why the Uber accident makes such a huge news, right? So there's probably millions of car accidents every year happening around the world, but that's not big news. But if someday you see, me taking our flying machine and every single day to work, and after 4 years you still see me alive, then that may erase your, people's fear. So what are we gonna do is to make people less fear and embrace the future. So we are going to do this global flying demo tour this year, and we just tested out. We did this flying demo in Holland, and their Prince, tested out, and we did a bunch of tests in China, and hopefully this year, we can also get this chance to come into LA and to save you guys from the, traffic in LA as well. Yeah, so I think the time is pretty tight, and yeah, so basically we have done this, in the past 4 years, and a lot of people, criticizing us, a lot of people thought this is impossible, but we are making every single effort to make it happen. Thank you.
I think these two spotlight sessions really brought home how, when we think about the sustainability economy and these sustainability policies, drawing back from them isn't just about how many tons of coal get burned or what the mileage per gallon of SUVs are, but it's a much broader innovation economy. And as the senator said, when you start retreating from that, you miss out on all these innovations that other countries are pursuing. And as a member of the media, I'll do my part not to try to make people too nervous about these new ways of potentially dying. So please join me in thanking our spotlight presenters for their great presentations. And now we'll welcome to the stage Ben Cote. He'll be introducing the framer for this morning's first panel.
Morning. What a great honor for me it is to be part of this great day of discussion, sharing ideas, talking about innovation for a sustainable LA. Because innovation is key to sustainability. And this summit put together by LABC shows great foresight and progressive thinking. This is not surprising since Los Angeles has become the hub of progressive thinking, which catalyzes innovative development and creative solutions for the future and for a cleaner future. This is why Sanexen has chosen to be part of the LABC family and to be part of this great summit. I've had the privilege of seeing LA innovation at work at the Los Angeles Cleantech Incubator, where Sanexen water offices are now located. LACI gives innovative minds a place and the resources necessary to create sustainable products and services which will enrich our lives and protect our environment. Innovation and sustainability makes Sanexen's DNA. Driven by innovation, we set out 20 years ago to develop a solution for aging, leaking, and breaking water mains. Using trenchless technology and clean composite materials, we're now able to rebuild these breaking water mains from the inside without disruption and without digging the streets up. The technology, called AquaPipe, was developed with the California reality in mind, taking into account the seismic resiliency, water recovery, and the reduced impact on greenhouse gas emissions normally associated with traditional construction methods. But to change old construction methods to newer, less invasive methods requires forward thinking. And LA is the epicenter of forward thinking. I'm very proud to be part of the Los Angeles Business Council. Very happy to be a member of the Los Angeles Cleantech Incubator. But I'm especially very proud to introduce to you today the framer for today's Technology-Enabled Solutions panel. David Wright was named the General Manager of LADWP in September of 2016, tasked with overseeing the nation's largest municipal utility and 4 million customers. David came to LADWP to serve as Senior Assistant General Manager for the power systems in 2015. To becoming COO shortly thereafter. Prior to LADWP, David worked at the Las Vegas Valley Water District as Deputy General Manager and CFO, and then for the City of Riverside for nearly 25 years, where he began as City Controller and left as the Public Utilities General Manager. He has also held roles as President of the Southern California Public Power Authority and a member of the California Municipal Utilities Association. We at Sanexen are very excited to hear the strategic direction General Manager Wright is taking at LADWP. Please put your hands together for David Wright.
Hi, thanks for allowing me to come speak today. I really appreciate it. That last presentation on the drones was pretty amazing, and it gives me a chance to talk a little about technology at LADWP and how we use new things and look at different ways to approach things. We have a fleet of 4 helicopters. I didn't even know that until I got here, but every day we have someone in a helicopter observing the aqueducts, observing the transmission lines, and making sure there's no problems or anything. And we've recently got some drones, and we're using that to complement the helicopter observations now with drone observations with small cameras on. We have to test the technology, test the capabilities, but it makes me really excited just from sustainability greenhouse gas emissions to not be fueling up 4 helicopters every day and just looking at drones. So furthermore, we can look at it 24/7 because you can get kind of a night vision camera and then tie it to a computer program which says, if there's movement on the transmission line or the aqueduct, it needs to jump up on screen so that you've got something observing, something through a technology looking at all of these different drones, and then something that jumps up so a person can say there's something going on there, we need to do something. Another one with water pipes, rather than having to go fix a water main break, we're putting in earthquake resilient pipes, a new technology tested and implemented in Japan. And now we're going ahead and putting them in. They'll bend every which way. If you ever get a chance, you've got to go out and see kind of a mock-up of how it works, because it's amazing. But anyway, we're looking at a lot of different technologies, because our main goal is to transition to clean energy. Okay, that was obviously not what I was supposed to do. There we go. Well, that wasn't what I was supposed to do either. All right, so these are the priorities that we're looking at for really kind of the short-run technology and areas we need to significantly focus on to move us forward, to move LA forward, to move the world forward. There's obviously a lot of longer-term technologies, but these are some we're looking at right now. How do we transition the transportation sector to being fully electrified? The reduction in greenhouse gas emissions will be about 80% to 90% over the next several decades if we can do that. How do we transition to clean energy and make sure that we're able to use all that clean energy through some sort of storage and reuse? And I think most people know what the duck curve is. If you don't, it's the transition during the middle of the day by most of your energy coming from renewable resources to sundown when the peak starts occurring on our load. That really has to be, there aren't the renewable resources to supply all of the load at that time. And I'll get in just in a moment to a little bit of that. And then the customer-facing automation, the smart grid, having the ability to do everything you want in your home, both from your end, us being able to read meters, tell if there's issues at your home, that you have an outage before you know about it, rather than you having to call us, and then looking at how our entire system works and shifting energy around depending on how many local resources and how many imported resources we need. Some of those technologies that we're looking at, and the one that helps us solve that duck curve problem that I told you about, batteries or energy storage, it is literally what is the big thing that we're looking at next. And it has to be portfolio. It can't be just one type of battery, one type of pump storage, but we need to look at batteries, at location, at geographical diversity and technology diversity. We've also got to look at when I said the electrification of transportation industry, whether it's a bus, a train, or a shared vehicle or your own vehicle, they are all going to have batteries. And we've got to figure out how to utilize those batteries that are going to be in mobile sources as well as batteries and stationary sources, and how we can get energy both to the battery to charge it, and then what we don't have the ability to do well right now is pull the energy back out of the battery and use it to power the system. And then again, some of that is that smart meter, because all that has to be monitored. You're going to pay for the energy you use and be paid for the energy you supply back. There's a lot of technology that has to be placed right into that meter. We're always looking at emerging technologies and truly how the distributed generation on our local system interacts with all those very large facilities that are importing solar or geothermal or wind from hundreds of miles away. Transportation electrification, it is going to be, in my mind, the biggest thing that we need to focus on, and that we need to accomplish, and that we're going to need technology for. There's been a lot of greenhouse gas regulation on utilities, because at a state level, you can truly regulate that. A lot harder at a state level to regulate transportation. So we've really got to look at how we interact between the two sectors. The great thing about electrifying transportation is there's not only the global benefit, but there's a local, regional air quality benefit too. And we've got, again, to look at how those two sectors work, look at how we plan now for a much larger load. Our load will go up by 50% if all the vehicles become electric. We've got to plan for an increase over the next 20 to 30 years of 50% of our load. That's a huge number of resources that we have to figure out where they are, how to get them here, and how they'll be used. And then finally, essentially, our job is taking technology, delivering it to all 4 million people. One of the latest things that we're doing, because we're really trying to improve the kind of awareness, understanding, and ability to move forward into electric vehicles. We just put in 22 charging stations at a facility we own. So if you don't have a charger at home, you can drive there. Two of the chargers are those that'll charge your vehicle in 15 to 20 minutes. Drive in there, spend 15 minutes to an hour, pay your bill, charge up your vehicle, drive on out. And so kind of looking at, I put conclusions, this is kind of just framing, but what are the limitations, possibilities of new technology? They are beyond anything we can think of, but we've got to look at what exists, how we can move forward, and then start requesting this is the type of thing that we need, because it tends to be the private sector that starts thinking of a lot of those answers, and we'll get 10 different answers and be able to look at the best. We've got to look at reliability. We have to be able to provide power at a predictable voltage that doesn't waver too much, and we've got to do that 100% of the time. We've got to regulate, but we've got to be able to move forward, and then really we've got to make sure it's affordable for everybody and figure out ways to do that. You can almost afford to do anything, not everything, but almost anything, but there is a cost associated with that. And power ought to be available to everybody at an affordable level. Finally, kind of just switching to the last one is how do we get it all then on a smartphone that everyone can use? So anyway, with that, that's kind of framing the discussion, and then I know we'll move on and bring the panel in. So thank you very much.
Now, please welcome our Technology-Enabled Solutions panelists and moderator, Matt Petersen, President and CEO of the LA Cleantech Incubator.
All right. Well, we've been a great panel. We'll invite them out, come on out and join us here on stage. We're running a little bit behind, so we're going to try to keep this exciting, dynamic conversation going this morning. It's good to be back here on stage with our friends at LABC, incredible organization. This is always an event that I think each of us that have been nearly every year try to prioritize on our schedules and clear the day. So it's great to be with you all this morning. So since I was last here, I've changed my jobs. I was in the mayor's office as Chief Sustainability Officer, working with David and Marty Adams, the COO, and Bill Funderburk, the Commissioner, and all the other great people at the Department of Water Power. Now they're my landlord. We are running LA Cleantech Incubator. We are blessed to be the stewards of the La Cret's Innovation Campus, and Los Angeles Cleantech Incubator is really driving forth the green economy of the future by making sure we not only incubate great startups in Los Angeles, some of them are here today, but how do we really make sure the benefits of the green economy get to everybody, whether it's in Watts or Pacoima or other parts of the region, and we're prioritizing transportation, energy, and sustainable cities. And if you haven't been down to the campus, please come down and join us. It's an amazing, inspiring place to see all the innovation, and someone described it as the front door of innovation here in Los Angeles. So please come down and join us someday. I wanted to introduce our panel. We won't go into bios, but just from your left to right. Elizabeth Fretheim, Senior Director of Supply Chain and Sustainability at Walmart. Welcome. Paul Jennings, Principal of PCS Energy. We skipped somebody. Kasey Krape, Senior Program Manager. They changed seats on me, so I got a little confused. Strategy and Business Development of Tesla. Dennis Rodriguez, Chief City Executive of Siemens, and Dr. Zafer Sahinoglu. Did I say that right? Yes. Okay. Senior Director of Business Innovation Division, Mitsubishi Electric of the United States, and of course, David Wright, General Manager of Department of Water Power. All right. So we're going to start with a question for each of you this morning, just to set you up. Starting with you, Elizabeth. Walmart is the largest private employer in the world, over 2.3 million associates worldwide. The company's been the leader in the private sector on sustainability. You've established a goal around 100% renewable energy, critically important. And your trucking fleet, the third largest in the United States, is part of that goal. So as you think about electrifying your fleet in the future, how does that change, if at all, how you think about the 100% renewable energy target?
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation to be here. You know, I don't know about all of you, but being in the transportation space for the last decade, I think it's super exciting that we can even have this conversation around electrifying a Class 8 vehicle. And, you know, thanks to Tesla that really kind of kicked things off and got that going. You know, just that ability to even be putting that into our mindset. Now, I have to admit, though, when I first started looking at the calculations, you know, I looked at how much diesel fuel we're using now and converted that to kilowatt hours. I really didn't believe my calculations. I had to go to some of my colleagues, and I'm like, is my thinking even right on this? Because the number was just so big. You know, it was a little over 3 times the total energy used by all of our distribution centers. And so I started to have a mini panic attack as I thought about this 100% renewable energy goal and how are we going to get there? Can we get there? You know, and so obviously, you know, once you come down off that panic attack, you start to look at what are all of the different solutions. And electrification will certainly be a part of it, but we are looking at other solutions as well. So as far as how will it affect our goal, you know, it will in some ways and it won't in other ways. So maybe I'll talk a little bit about how it will, you know, besides causing panic attacks. We're really got a huge focus on efficiency, and I think that made us kind of start thinking even more strongly about that, because obviously the less energy that we need, the less energy we actually have to create to support that. So as you start thinking about you know, the demands on the grid and infrastructure right now, the less we can impact that, the better. So we really started to double down on those efforts. We doubled the efficiency of our fleet in 2015 over a 2005 baseline, and we've actually achieved an additional 25% since then. So we're really focused and working on that. I think it's also made us take a more holistic view of our facilities. So rather than kind of thinking of transportation and electricity as 2 different things, how do we look at the entire site and all of the demands and manage those together? So you think about the building itself, the equipment that we have to run, our associates that are coming in that may want to charge their vehicles, or if we're at a store, you know, our customers that want to charge their vehicles. We announced earlier this week that we're going to be doubling the amount of sites, doubling the amount of stores that will have charging infrastructure. I think we'll be one of the largest hosts in the United States. But really looking at that holistically, you know, whether it's looking at AI to be able to manage it better. So if I'm plugging in an over-the-road truck that, you know, maybe needs an hour of charge time, but I have 2 hours of idle time, you know, how does the system sort of figure out when is it best to charge that truck, considering the needs of the rest of the facility? So really looking at it as a holistic system rather than separate on its own. You know, we're going to be working with the utilities and other innovators like Solar City, and, you know, PCS has some solutions on on-site renewable energy. Battery storage is another area that we're super excited about, not only to provide the energy, but help with some of that energy management that I talked about, that we have looking at it. Off-site energy is going to become more important as we start looking at contracts. We only have so much physical space on our properties to put on solar. It's very difficult to do any wind on a property, even if it's a distribution center that's out, you know, in a more remote area. So looking at some of those larger off-site contracts is going to become more important. Thinking about regulations, you know, how can we make it easier to do things that are behind the meter? With that, standards, extremely important. You know, we have our own trucks. We also have third-party carriers. We need to be able to plug those in wherever we go, and not have to worry about, do we have the right charger in the right place to be able to do that. And I think collaboration, both internally to Walmart, again, because we sort of had our transportation group and our energy group, and the two, talked once in a while, but not all that often. And so we've really formed, much tighter collaborations. And then I think collaborations with the utilities, with the solution providers. So definitely some changes, but I would say what isn't going to change is, we have this goal for 100% renewable energy. We knew it was ambitious when we started, and so we're going to figure it out. And so continuing to look at innovation and how we get there is just a part of what we do now.
Yeah, very exciting. And with, you just pointed out, a totally different conversation that wouldn't have happened before. Yes, you would have worked with the utility on the energy side, but now they're going to be one of your transportation fuel providers, and it really is a critical conversation. And I know David and his team are thinking differently about how they have that conversation as well. And speaking of, Lacey is launching soon a major zero emissions goods movement and transportation initiative. And Paul, you're going to be an important partner of ours in that, and you've got some exciting plans for your company here in Los Angeles around EV charging infrastructure. But you're the largest commercial solar provider in the city of LA currently, and you've focused on commercial development. So why focus on commercial development with your solar projects, and what are the benefits of in-basin solar as we try to strive whether the sustainable city plan goals for solar or renewable energy overall that DWP is working towards and the mayor's office? Why are those important?
So as way background, let me share a little bit of where we're coming from. I have a business partner of 30 years. We consider ourselves entrepreneurs, which usually is code word. We were the C and D students in school. And then you had to figure out a way to make a living from there. 83 got in telecommunications, and there's a reason I mention that, and I'm going to weave it into your question, Matt. In 1994, after the earthquake, we went out in 95 and started buying up a lot of the damaged earthquake buildings, worked with LA Housing, so housing department with FEMA money, affordable housing, all these things. So we have two experiences, one in technology, one very much anchored into real estate. We look for new opportunities. We build companies. We'll then sell them. And we're what I'd call the early entrepreneur adapters. If you're too early, you get shot with, pioneers, as they say, get shot with arrows. So there's an important timing of when people get involved. I think the interesting thing that we represent is we use our own money. This is not Wall Street money. And I think what that speaks to is a much bigger picture of, I use the analogy of a souffle. When you look at a souffle, you have to have the right ingredients, you have to put it in the right temperature oven, and you have to get momentum. Well, momentum is a key to business success. And when we look at Los Angeles, to answer your question about commercial, Los Angeles is an incredibly unique place. Our only footprint, for the most part, is in the DWP footprint for a set of reasons, and that is, from our point of view, Los Angeles has leadership with Mayor Garcetti and some of the predecessors in some of the smart things it's done. DWP has a very unique position because it's more policy driven. It's not, dollar to quarter driven. Ironically, over time, the policy will always get you a better place, and that's evident in that DWP has some of the best rates, water rate, power rates, and quality of service in the country of any major city. And then you look at, where's the industry at in its cycle? Los Angeles in particular, when it comes to electrification, is unique because you look at all the electric cars, and you can correct me if I'm right on this statistic, is half the electric cars end up in California, because by nature we're early adopters. But half of that is in Los Angeles. So a quarter of the cars are in Los Angeles. So you have a much higher concentration. And we have anecdotes. We're far down the road of wanting to be one of the significant players. So where the city and DWP has partnered with the private industry, folks like us, is in large part, you have the federal government tax credits. And to anybody who argues, well, that's subsidy, it's less subsidized than the fossil fuel business, but more importantly, it's infrastructure. Washington has been talking about infrastructure when you want to put $1 trillion out. Every time you put a meaningful solar project or a wind project, that's long-term infrastructure. The Hoover Dam was the single best investment the U.S. government ever made in a project. And I would argue what's going on right now is in that same realm. It's the most important thing we can be doing for a whole bunch of reasons. So when we looked at all those pieces, we found there was a lot of the right ingredients. A good political will, an organization that has a lot of really smart ways. I always say about DWP, you know, they get beat up a lot, but when you look at macro picture, they're doing all the right moves. And then the third one is the notion of a microgrid. That's where my telecommunication background comes in. If you look at what happened in '83 when I got into business, it was about at the time, depending on how you wanted to measure it, is about a $10 billion industry. Today, again, depending on how you want to measure it, you know, how far down the food chain with, you know, smartphones, the apps, it could arguably be $1 trillion. So it's a 100-fold increase. To us, what is so exciting as business people, and we don't think we're unique because we think we just represent what is yet to come in terms of more, not the big Wall Street and the securitizing and some of the things that, you know, maybe some of the big players like Solar City has done, but you'll get more regionalized, boots on the ground type guys, because there's a lot of brain damage in what I'm about to say, and that is when you start doing these big solar projects in basin, or as in the feed-in tariff program, the effort to put that up on the roof, to go on top of a hangar roof as we are out in Van Nuys Airport, the interconnection fees, all those things, you have to ask yourself, why do I want to do this? Well, it gets back to telecommunications. If you look at parallels, because there are a lot of parallels that we all now see, it's that saying of with children, the days are long, the weeks are slow, when they're out the door, it's how quickly it went. And that is, we're now 30 years into telecom. Who would have ever thought it is to what it is today? We're somewhere around year 8 or 9 in the, what I consider the energy revolution. So where is it going? You have microgrids. If you look at where the pinch point or the cost for utilities to run, it's always a bottleneck. And why infill solar and the commercial we're doing is so important. We believe first you put out this footprint, which very much ties into understanding real estate and having that marriage with real estate to go on top of somebody's roof. And then there'll come a time, even though you know, what looks to be expensive right now at 14 cents, the driver is the footprint that we go out and create, and then when the solar panel goes up by 2 or 3 times in potency per square foot, 3 times the output, the economics change overnight. All of a sudden, we can produce energy, we can afford to sell for 7 cents. The system's getting 3 times more of the power, and economically, everybody's winning. So you couple then that with cars. Since we will be the early adopters to the cars and electrification, from an entrepreneur perspective, there is about to be $100+ billion to shift over the next 10 to 20 years. The fossil fuel industry is on the losing end of it, and as I tell all my new employees, you're on the right side of the argument. You're on renewables. And they always go home and tell their family that, so it makes them feel good. So when you look at the amount of money shift and the economic opportunities, it's vast. And what's so interesting about the electrification of cars and the whole system is it requires more and more power. So the elasticity and the demands increase, which I think goes full circle back. The DWPs of the world are constantly looking for their pinch point, and that's where I think the best value of the microgrid comes in. So we're very strategic in where we look to put in our solar fields, and we're equally strategic when we look to put in the EVs. Of course, looking at, you know, the disadvantages, making sure it's equitable from a society point of view, but we have endless anecdotes where when we put in the EV charger, which DWP has a fabulous program on, within a month, there are 2 or 3 brand new electric cars sitting there. Why? Because 60% of Los Angeles residents do not have the practical ability to buy an electric car unless you start deploying EV chargers in the places they live. And equally important, you know, the folks living out in Palmdale coming out to work in West LA, if there's not an EV charger in the parking lot, we've all heard road rage, buffer rage, you'll hear EV rage soon. So important concept. So with that, that's why we're doing what we're doing. Last thing I'll say, I would hope, as David, you were talking, and the gentleman with the flying car, here's the potential of political leadership, and like our mayor right now, I believe, is becoming the visionary. You go back to JFK days in early 1960, and he put the country to a challenge. That challenge was we had just gotten beat by the Russians to space with Sputnik, and he said in 1960, he said, we're going to go to the moon by the end of the year, by the end of the decade, and it's not what you can do for the country. It's not what the country does for you, it's what you can do for the country. As a society, we won. We took a very constructive, very competitive view of it, and we got there. The great news to me about how far down China is and the movement they're making, they become our next Sputnik, where if we get the right political leadership, and you can set that vision, the opportunities are immense. And folks like us fall into place willing to spend the money.
Oh, thank you, Paul. You said it well. And thanks to Paul and LA Business Council and Department of Water and Power and all the other companies out there. LA just returned to holding the crown of #1 solar city in America, something we strove for when I was in the mayor's office. It's great to have that claim again, and as we also have the most EV chargers of any city in the country, and that was another goal we set in the plan. But David, you have, of course, with Paul's help and others, going to get many more than that. I think 10,000 or more. Kasey, so you're a big part of all this with Tesla. When I was in the mayor's office, as part of our work to make LA to have the most BEVs, battery electric vehicles, of any city fleet, LAPD was the first part of the city that stood up and said, we're going to help lead that revolution. But to help bring a little attention to that, I reached out to Elon Musk, and he loaned us a Model S. And now the police department's testing that to actually see, not just for show and tell, which is fun to see the Model S look like a cop car, but they're actually testing it to see if it could be part, electric vehicle could be the pursuit vehicle of the future. So everybody knows about the Model S and the Model 3, but I was there at that launch with the Tesla Semi. That was really exciting when Elon had that thing roll out. But why is Tesla getting in the heavy truck business, and what do you think this will do to impact the goods movement sector?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm a little nervous. I'm excited to be here. And I have been with Tesla for a long time, since before Model S, so over 6 years. And if you would have asked me then, or told me then, that we would be in the heavy duty space, I would have thought you were crazy.
Especially from the Roadster,
Yeah, exactly. That's small, heavy duties, massive machine, and you want that to be all electric. I just would have thought there would never been a possibility. However, I think a lot of this stemmed from just needing something for ourselves. We manufacture a product and need to move it. We need to get it from A to B. And especially with the opening of our Gigafactory in Reno and our manufacturing facility that sits in California, they're about 260 miles apart. We very quickly had this dedicated lane of freight moving back and forth on a regular basis. It didn't take us long to realize that we're moving parts for an electric car and a diesel truck. Doesn't really go along with our mission, who we are and what our master plan is. So right then and there, we decided to look at the development of what it would mean to have an all-electric heavy-duty truck. We specifically targeted the Class 8 because it is the heaviest polluter on the road today. So if you're going to tackle a problem, you should look at where it is the biggest to have your largest impact. As we started to then look through development to what you got to see at the Unveil event, which is our first prototypes, we also need things, as Elizabeth said, to be efficient. We move very quickly at Tesla, and we also need them to be more cost effective. And we realized that we had a very viable commercial product on our hands with the increased efficiencies that an electric motor brings to you, and the power of a battery, as well as the business case being so strong with that of the cost savings and a lower cost of ownership from diesel to electricity. And that is why we kind of offered it up to other consumers to also have the opportunity to not only have an environmental impact in their fleet and help support their sustainability goals, but also to help them save money overall of running the cost of their fleet.
Great. Well, thank you. And as you touched on, goods movement is in Los Angeles. due largely to the diesel trucks, but also the other heavy equipment, is the greatest source of air pollution. And so it's so critically important that we accelerate these solutions. And I know you have a lot of exciting announcements around customers that have made early pledges to buy the trucks, and we're seeing some others sort of step up their game in the wake of the model, of the semi-truck. So we're excited to see what comes next. Dennis, you've worked on Siemens has worked on trying to help cities for a long time. You're the chief city executive. You've worked on advancing electrification of transportation. You've got some innovations there. You're helping the city of LA and the mayor's office think about how do we reduce the city's greenhouse gas emissions and footprint. But you also just announced and released an exciting paper, Digitalization of Energy Systems, and looking at the current and future impact on power infrastructure and energy systems. So as we look to decarbonize, Senator De Leon really laid it out for us of the need and how we can lead. How do we move towards decarbonization and decentralization? It's a challenge, and utilities are struggling, whether it's DWP or Edison, other IOUs. How do we balance it all out? And so what can you share about what digitalization does to help provide those solutions we need?
Yeah, that's a great question, Matt. Thank you so much. And, it's a pleasure to be back here. We were back here in 2018, so this is our second visit. It's such an incredible summit. I think listening to the drone presentation just kind of, blew my mind in terms of thinking about ways of transportation, which is, obviously a big focus for this summit. Siemens is a global conglomerate, so, that's the first thing people think of when they think of our company. Our CEO came out in the recent times and he basically said, we want to think of ourselves as a startup. So we want to have a global footprint, a global presence, but we as business developers and individuals in the company, we need to think of ourselves as a startup. And what that basically means is we've got the flexibility and the nimbleness to kind of take action and move forward. And that's critical when you're talking about technology. So with digitalization, I really think this is at the forefront of a lot of the conversation in today's infrastructure landscape. So if you're talking about transportation, if you're talking about electricity, if you're talking about water movement, if you're talking about buildings, digitalization is something that can assist with all those sectors. And what digitalization is really a two-way communication. So I think Paul kind of touched on it briefly in terms of telecommunication. Digitalization is really taking a piece of infrastructure, applying a sensor to it, and then setting up a communication piece so you can have that infrastructure communicate with a singular platform that collects all those data points. Where we're talking about a data revolution, we're talking about a communication revolution. And when you get to the platform, what you're doing from that point is you're looking at it from an analytical perspective. So the analysis and the cloud computing and the artificial intelligence behind the digital landscape is really what powers your best decision-making processes from that point. So if you're a building owner, if you're the general manager of the Department of Water and Power, you can look at this data, you can look at what's been crunched and the analytics behind it, and you can say, well, here's my best decision process from a cost perspective. Here's my best decision process from a life cycle perspective, from a safety perspective, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all that kind of goes into what we see at Siemens as a real digital revolution, and it's exciting. You can basically apply this type of approach to a whole bunch of different verticals. I think we'll probably talk about a few of them on this panel. But it's a wave of the future, and it's something that Siemens is jumping into with both feet. And it's not simple, it's not cheap, it's not necessarily cost effective. If you look at older infrastructure, you're really talking about putting assets and monitoring things that have been in place for decades, and that can be challenging. Sometimes you have to dig up infrastructure and go through a route to make this attachment, this telecommunication attachment. When you're talking about the future landscape and you're talking about the electrification of everything, that's a little easier because you can put a communication device on a street light, and that street light can talk to a vehicle, and that vehicle can talk to a building. And at the end of the day, as you're driving down the street, you can determine there's a pedestrian walking in the crosswalk, and you should probably slow down. So that's the exciting part of it. I think it's a wave that's coming, and I think we're excited to be in that space.
Very, very exciting. Well, you talked about the intelligence in the system and how we're going to have new levels and dimensions of communication. It's already happening. Automakers are becoming really digital solution companies, communications companies, connectivity companies, content providers as they look at autonomy. But that backbone, the transportation fuel, is coming through a system largely that doesn't have a lot of intelligence. I mean, we're making the grid smarter. We need to invest in the grid. But Zafer, in your work at Mitsubishi, you're really thinking about how do we bring more intelligence into these systems? How do we use AI? How do we use Internet of Things to really advance greenhouse gas emission reductions? And you've got to balance, these increasingly complex things that move us around as humans, and the goods that we need. 40% of all of our goods come through the ports of LA and Long Beach in this country. How do we bring more intelligence into the system, and what do you see as a sort of innovative uses of AI related to the energy sector?
First of all, thanks for having me, Matt.
Thank you.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the question. So AI and IoT, they create a growth reinforcing loop between themselves. So with IoT creates data, and AI uses data to produce outcomes. And with better outcomes, we have more motivation to deploy more IoT. And more IoT means more data. So, and these together reinforces each other, and then we will have more use of AI algorithms and more IoT platforms. And when we look at in what kind of problems we can exploit AI, for problems in the form of detection, estimation, prediction, optimization, with use of AI, we can achieve better performance and outcomes. So I would like to give one specific example from our experience. In microgrids, in EVs, in virtual power plants, energy storage is an important element. Right? And let's take lithium ion as an example. So to better operate a battery system, you need to estimate its state of charge, its state of health, or state of power, how much power you can draw from a battery for how long. So conventional, traditional techniques try to model the internal physical dynamics of a battery system. And when you try to come up with mathematical expressions to model these, you will end up with 5, 6 pages long of equations, and you will still fall short of modeling all these internal nonlinear dynamics. So I think this is falling.
Yeah, it's coming off your ear.
Speaking of falling short.
There you go.
Okay, so using the traditional techniques, for example, for state of charge estimation of lithium-ion batteries, you make a 3 to 5% error. But if you use an AI-based approach, this error goes down below 1%. So if you are not making too much error, you can faster charge these storage systems. You can faster discharge. And your charge and discharge operations will be even healthier. So you will not damage the battery. So that's one benefit of AI, for example. Another interesting use case for AI in the area of commercial buildings. So to forecast load, your variables are typically weather metrics like temperature, humidity, and also occupancy level. So a traditional approach to detect the occupancy level in a building is to deploy motion sensors, right? But with AI, we have shown that you can exploit existing Wi-Fi signals in that building environment, and then any motion inside the building will distort your received observed signals, and then you can estimate the occupancy level of a building, and then this information will improve your load forecast, for example. So the biggest greenhouse gas emission reduction impact of AI will be in the area of transportation by making cars autonomous. And we know that autonomous cars must be electric, right? So there's an indirect impact there. And how can AI make vehicles autonomous? So using computer vision techniques today, cars can detect objects on the road ahead. They can classify these objects into pedestrian, other vehicles or bicycles, for example. They can read lane marks and traffic signs. And the performance achievable with today's algorithms is about 98%. And just recently, a paper got published. They were using a new innovative deep learning approach called capsule networks. They claimed they can further improve the error by 46%, for example, by even using less training data. So I think AI will shorten timeline for autonomous vehicles, and it will create a huge impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And I would like to talk a little bit more about IoT. So today, there are over 400 IoT platforms and thousands of IoT-related services. And about 75% of those IoT services are related to sustainable development goals set by United Nations, including smart grids, smart cities, and smart communities, responsible consumption and production. But when we look at the size of these IoT projects, they are mostly, 95% of them, small and mid-size. There are only a few large-scale IoT projects. And these small and mid-sized projects are mostly funded by R&D budgets, and they are in the form of pilots. So they are not funded from like business P&L. So, and there are some reasons for it. The main reason is, so we do not have enough infrastructure to provide economies of scale for large-scale IoT service businesses. So this infrastructure needs to be in place, and I think the key role goes to the government, and they should address this to overcome the infrastructure challenges. The infrastructure for transportation, infrastructure for smart grids. And by infrastructure, I mean communication and sensing infrastructure that will create data to be able to use AI algorithms. So I think that's my conclusion.
Thank you. Yeah, adding more intelligence in the system and making sure we're able to utilize it, I think is a critically important question. In the initiative that I mentioned earlier that Paul's part of course, Department of Water and Power and other partners, we're approaching it as Air Resources Board, AQMD, the utilities have all committed, Edison have committed to electrification and transportation, and the mayor has set some ambitious targets as well. And we know the autonomous future is coming. We know this disruption is coming. Nobody knows quite what it's going to look like entirely. But we know the notion that we want it to be shared and electric, so we don't have more cars on the road. It's more electric vehicles and more traffic isn't necessarily what we're looking for, and certainly not more air pollution from more vehicles, even if they are autonomous. So how do we make those work together? But David, given the frame of our discussion we've had with you and Mary Nichols and Ron and others, of how do we accelerate the zero-emission goods movement revolution and transportation electrification using the Olympics? We're going to welcome the world here. We just, unfortunately, as Senator Daley announced, talked about, we've continued to have the worst air quality in the nation here, and we need to welcome athletes and visitors from around the world in 10 years to a place where we've continued to clean up our air. We've come and made historic progress, but we've got a long way to go. How do you think about this challenge? I mean, it's probably something that keeps you up at night around how you're going to meet the demand. It's a great opportunity, right? It's also exciting. It's a future revenue source for the utility. But as we try to electrify all things transportation, how do we manage the need for increased loads and demand? How are you thinking about it? And then we'll open it up to the rest of the panel.
So first we look at, and we're doing a study on how to get to 100% renewables right now. How long will it take? How much will it cost? What will it turn into rates? Because again, affordability is something that is a piece of the pie as important as anything else. And now I've directed staff to take that 100% renewables and add on, what if load increases by 50% again over the next 20 years? How are we going to do that? And they're now looking for how to do that the most thoughtfully, the least environmental impact. We have two huge transmission lines. One runs along the coast right up to Washington. One goes to Utah and can go beyond. There are there's a lot of renewable resources along those two transmission paths. So we're starting to investigate just every potential opportunity, you know, wind in Wyoming. We're looking at, there's a huge salt dome underneath where the transmission lines is in Utah. How can we take renewable energy, force the air into the salt dome, essentially creating like a scuba tank, and then at the time that you need the air or you need the energy, you pull the air out of that underground salt dome and it powers a generator. Looking at all these different alternatives. One of the things is running a utility, you've got to pay attention to human behavior. One of the best ways to do that is the first 10 or 15 years I was here, I would take phone calls from customers as well as trying to run the utility, because it's really good to have a close connection to your customer. Also, I lived where I worked, so when I was out getting groceries, someone would walk up and complain to me because I had like my milk in this hand, going, just getting milk, and I look like a mess, but sure, I'll hear about whatever you have to say. But we look at behavior. To me, one of the most important things that we can do to transition over the next 10 years, and it's such a good kind of time horizon, is make it so people don't have to think about how they're going to power their electric vehicle. Make it so that we look at goods movement. We've talked to Edison already about, is there a pilot project we could look at from the port to Ontario, where most of the warehouses are? You charge up in LADWP territory down by the port, you drive 50 miles to Ontario, you dump all the goods off, you power the vehicle there, and you're just doing the loop. But how can we take that loop from fossil fuel powered to renewable energy powered? And so it's taking all of these fantastic technologies and thoughts and trying to put it in how does human behavior use that, use it easy, and be able to think about how to move it forward. We're also talking about how we could do that on that whole Western United States kind of interstate of goods movement. So truly looking at how we can make it work, make it easy. Our lives are complicated enough. We got to focus on how to make it easy for our customers. We had 1,000 chargers when I first got into this position. I told staff I want 10,000 vehicle chargers within 5 years. I've now, well, thank you. But that's a pittance. It's not enough. You said we got 1/4 of the vehicles in LA. So I've said, go back to the drawing board, and I want you to tell me how to get to 25,000 chargers in 5 years. Because if we don't have the chargers, it doesn't matter what anyone wants. You got to get down to being able to plug in your vehicle as you go to the movies or as you park in Ontario as your truck is being unloaded. Finally, again, in order to get it to everyone, we're looking at, I'm a believer, we've got a lot of early adopters here. We don't need to incentivize early adopters to buy vehicles. We need to incentivize the secondary market. We need to incentivize used vehicle purchases. So LADWP has a $450 rebate if you go out and buy a used electric vehicle.
Which I love. It's fantastic. It's such an innovation.
And then let's look at, DWP owns lots of little parcels. Let's figure out if we can get those little parcels and turn them into a little place where you can charge 10 vehicles. Because half of our customers, they rent. Their landlord is not going to touch the wiring on an 80-year-old building to put in a charger unless we force them, and we can't force them. So let's get a charger adjacent to their house, hanging from a utility pole, which we have, with a green thing that says you can park there 2 hours and then you have to move on. It's how do we take all this and make it easy to use? And for me, that's the biggest challenge, but it's not the most complicated challenge. It's throw out a bunch of chargers and make purchasing vehicles easier, and then look at the goods movement to make that easier, and it will just move itself.
Thank you. We're going to do one more question after this, and then we'll wrap up a little early because we're running behind, as I mentioned. But I'll give Paul, give you a chance, anybody else to answer this question.
As I'm sitting here, it occurred to me very strategically, you have all the players that will put together the future. And let me give it to you in these terms. We all pay for monthly charge on a phone. We don't pay per minute anymore, which is the way we used to. The reason for that is there was a defining moment for any of you Bellhead or telecom folks out there, technology called Signal 7. Today, we would likely call it AI. All it did was take what was a traditional Bell network and take it from a utilization of around 25%, because when you made a phone call, it had to take one cable pair across the country and then get to the other end. The technology then started routing calls to the most efficient pipeline available, wherever there was a hole available. They then, through smart economists, they figured out how to economically incent people. So today, the fiber network in this country is about 90% utilized. My belief is that because there's billions and hundreds of billions of dollars that have to be funded for the infrastructure to electrify the world. But there's a drop-off point that's much quicker to get there, and that is when you start incorporating methodologies in which you can increase the utilization of the existing grid that is only being used in certain points, because your world, you're always having to design to that 1 or 2 peak days. It's actually very inefficient, and that's where the combination of, you put solar panels up, you have batteries there that can take a lot of the extra power off, plan it out, you have the switching gear that you have that allows safe protection within the DWP network, you have the artificial intelligence that over time understands patterns, consumers. You change those patterns through economic incentives where you see you want to change those patterns, which DWP already actually does a great job. And then most importantly, you have corporate citizenship. People like Walmart. I think Apple just announced they're 100%. They're a big, huge flying saucer, 100% sustainable. So when you have the big visible corporate responsibility coming on, it all brings it together. And I will make a prediction that whether it's 20 years or 30 years, that the rational billing for electrical will no longer be per minute, because the beauty of renewable, unlike today where you have, for every kilowatt hour, you have to take something, whether it's gas, oil, and if you're lucky enough, you have hydro, which is renewable. But once you step away from that, you make capital investments in renewable, it's no longer incremental cost. The rational business model will become what size, just like your home, what size pipeline do you want, and that's how you'll be billed, and you'll have all the economic opportunities or value to do it off-peak, and then all of a sudden the network becomes much more efficient, and that's how we can get through to the electrification, have every garage have an electric car in it, without overburdening ourselves getting there. So I just wanted to make that observation.
Quick answer, Dennis, and then we'll move to our last question.
Yeah, so David, I don't want to scare you, but Siemens just came out with what we call our City Performance Tool results yesterday. City Performance Tool basically analyzes 2035 and 2050 greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So we looked at the transportation sector and the all-electrification of the transportation sector, cargo trucks, medium-duty buses, passenger vehicles. We predict that there's going to be a 1,660% uptick in electrical consumption by the year 2050 as it relates to electrical transportation. So the challenge is, not to scare you.
More resources.
The challenge is how do you get to a point where you can meet that demand, not only as a utility, but also as private citizens and property owners and things of that nature. So I think we've got our work cut out for us, but you know, with your leadership and I think private technology companies, we can meet that challenge.
It does mean, and we cannot power LA currently, and even the technologies we see coming shortly, from just the footprint of LA. We have to have resources throughout the West, and we need the geographic diversity, because when the sun might be down in Oregon, it's going to be shining in Vegas, and when the wind's blowing in Wyoming, it might not be blowing in Palm Springs. So that we do have to be good neighbors to our fellow states, because we're going to be drawing energy from them.
All right, we're going to move to our last question, and we'll go across the panel. So we've in context here, regulation has, for a long time in California, set the pace for setting the bar for innovation. We've seen whether it's Elon or other OEMs really respond to that in different ways, and that's really been driving the EV market, at least initially. Now we're seeing innovation leapfrog regulation, and whether it's set by the legislature, the governor, or a CARB. So whether it's Hyperloop or something like bike share. We thought the metro bike share and docked-based bike share systems were the cutting edge, and all of a sudden it's old line technology with Lime Bike and with Bird scooters, and so we've seen this disruption. So what do you see as one of the most important technological advancements or any regulatory or any type of innovation that you see coming or that needs to occur for us to continue to move forward over the next 5 years?
So I think for us is, some of this innovation, I mean, it's a fantastic time to be looking, for innovation because it's out there and it's coming so fast. But it can be extremely expensive. If you make, especially at the scale of a Walmart, if we pick the beta over the winter VHS, right, and you're talking about the infrastructure, all the infrastructure we need to support that, it's going to be pretty expensive to make that wrong move. So if we can find, a way to build the foundational architecture that allows for these innovations to continue to plug in, I think that's going to be a way that we can do it. And some of, we heard some of the AI and other solutions that are there that we can, we have that foundation and then we're just able to sort of plug and play these different innovations.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul?
Yeah, I would say government and leadership in the following sense that this is like the U.S. military when they set out to do something. The breadcrumbs of their technology are fascinating, i.e. GPS we all use started as a military. So when you have the right political will to get something done, because you look at our next pinch point, it's batteries. How do you store it? If we can produce more energy, you have to start being able to distribute it at a more even rate. So an example would be, I would hope, the next administration, much like the last administration did, they apply tax credits and other financial incentives. That's what addresses the rational part where companies, they need the assistant. Because, being the perfect citizen only goes so far because at the end of the day, it's rational economics that drives things. So I think it's a combination of the right politics, right government help, and then the local leadership where folks like DWP and the City of LA create strong partnerships, put out a consistent message, which then ultimately attracts folks like us and others willing to commit and see a real business model through it all.
Thank you. Kasey?
Yeah, so thinking about technology and innovation in the next 5 years, I think that it has less to do with the technology itself and actually scalability. I think the technology exists already. I'm excited and encouraged to hear so many of you talk about infrastructure because I think that the technology is here. You should plan for it today, not in 10 years. It is very much readily available, and we need to start really acting and executing on those things. To hear you mention about, how do we identify areas of the heaviest polluted areas are a lot of times also low income.
Yep.
And you mentioned the ports, and I know that a lot of our customers and reservation holders are already doing a lot of activity and business in and out of those ports. I hope and to encourage them to use the trucks in those areas. I think that the infrastructure is going to be a huge piece of that and creating affordable, clean energy for them to have access to so that we can also then encourage and the adoption of the owner-operators and all of the other, even the smaller fleet locations. And I think that that is a really an area that we need to focus on in order to have a bigger impact in those underlying areas.
Yeah, equity is a critical factor. I know, thanks to Commissioner Funderburk and David's leadership, they're really focused on it. And certainly the state needs to be focused on how do we bring those benefits,
Yeah,
better
you're
air quality.
LA to Ontario, like I'm all over it. Like
Yeah.
we should totally do that.
Dennis?
So, great question. I agree with Kasey's point about scalability. I think there's no one technology answer, Matt, to kind of get specific. But I think connectivity coupled with security, specifically cybersecurity. I think those are two things we need to look at in terms of future developments. The more we connect things and the more we make things communicate with one another, whether it's old infrastructure or new infrastructure, we're making things cheaper, safer, more efficient. So that's a huge asset as a society. The flip side of that is we've got to secure it, and we've got to make sure it can't get tampered by bad actors outside of our region or what have you. So I think if we drive those two things forward, I think that's going to have a huge impact on us moving forward.
Great. Zafer?
Of course, my default answer is AI. So we will see huge advances in
Let the computers
self-learning
figure it
AI
out.
systems. But I have a second bet, and it is fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell technologies for EV charging. 2 years ago, there were only 2 hydrogen fuel cell charging stations in California. Today, there are 33. And in the past 10 years, cost went down by 5x, and performance improved by 2x, and power density 3x improvement. And in the next 5 years, I expect there will be at the same rate of innovation in fuel cell technologies, and it will become less cost prohibitive. Today, hydrogen can be produced. In those stations, hydrogen is produced from methane gas reformation, and it has a byproduct of carbon monoxide. And the state of California has a mandate that requires 33% of that generation to be from renewables. And I think we are not too far from that. So the current cost level is about $12 to $13 per gas equivalent gallon. Maybe in the next 5 years, I think we'll go down to $5 and $6.
Thank you.
And for example, like Hyundai Tucson can charge in 5 minutes to drive 400 miles. So, and the barrier here is we are making so much investment in EV charging from the grid. So there may be some like regulatory and political barriers for penetration of hydrogen-based charging infrastructure.
David?
So I think we can be leaders in LA, but much of what has to happen across the state. We've got to incentivize all the utilities to work together towards the common goal of, in my mind, continuing with the renewables, but most focusing on electric vehicles, on the infrastructure, on the ability to get the return for the investor-owned utilities on the infrastructure and the chargers they'll put in, and then the demonstration projects. We can, again, regulate the power industry in the state, but we can't regulate car manufacturers just from California. So it's a little bit different of an approach. Rather than the stick, we've got to move way more towards the carrot to encourage this so that we're the leaders. Then we do drive the marketplace, and through the market, we change the way vehicles are produced and the way demand is. But we've got to do it across the state, and as you mentioned, Matt, we're meeting with the other very large utilities so that we can do this as a joint effort.
Thank you, David. Well, with the power vested in me as moderator, as Paul pointed out, I think we've identified the transportation electrification and zero emission goods movement dream team here. So we're gonna go huddle backstage and figure out how we achieve complete zero emissions by 2028 when the Olympics are here. With that, please thank the panel. Great round of applause.